So what's your name?
Herbert Gager.
Herbert Gager.
Yep.
How old are you?
I was 90 the 5th of December.
Well, happy birthday.
Yes.
A little bit late. But,
Yeah.
um,
Born 1920.
1920. Wow. So where'd you grow up?
Out in Minnesota, halfway between Hopkins and Excelsior.
Oh,
A
okay.
place called Williston Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
I reckon I've been through there a couple times.
The hilly road coming down Highway 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. So that's not too far away.
No.
So including you and your parents, how big of a family did you have?
We had 3 boys and a girl in our family. But I was 10 years younger than my older brother.
Really?
So there was that much time between us, and one in the middle.
Nice. So what did your folks do for work?
Well, my dad worked for a company called O.B. McClintock. They made bank protection equipment.
Bank protection. What do you mean by that?
Well, burglar alarms and big clocks that hung on the street corner, and every town had one.
Mm-hmm.
Big bank, big clock.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked both out in the field and at the factory.
Hmm. And your mother?
My mother was a homemaker.
What was life like for you as a young person growing up?
Oh, I enjoyed life. I had my horse called Prince. He was an ex-racehorse, and when Dad would use him in the cultivator and come down to the end of the row, Prince would want to gallop. So there was a bit of a problem. But I used him for paper out, and rode him bareback, and loved him.
And you told me a minute ago your family had 2 acres that you cultivated.
That's right.
Every square inch.
Yes. Part of it was orchard and part of it was garden. And we raised flowers. Mm-hmm. And had chickens and had a cow and horse.
So, being that you had those resources during that time, the Great Depression, your family had a way to get by where others may not have.
We never went hungry. Mm-hmm. During the Depression, because my mother canned mm-hmm. everything. Canned 700 jars of chicken one year. Wow. We would butcher a cow and a quarter share with others. Mm-hmm. And we canned lots of vegetables. They had everything you could ever think of in the garden.
Well, I imagine that food storage and food preservation was a big deal. Being that you were in Minnesota in the wintertime, you've only got a limited amount of time to grow versus... Yeah.
And our cellar was our place where Mother stored the stuff. It was cool, no freezer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was canning. Mm-hmm. And so most of the meat that you preserved was canned, or did you do any smoking and salting down? Yeah, several ways of doing it like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My thing is like I said, I'm going to be 30 here pretty quick, and my generation really doesn't have any of the skill sets that people had during that time, and we rely on a push button society, and if anything were to ever happen with that, if we were to go into another depression, what do you think would be a skill set that would be beneficial?
Well, it's hard to say, and I don't know how things could work out in these times.
Mm-hmm.
because we're so dependent upon electric power
Mm-hmm.
and all of the gadgets.
Yeah. How big of a gap do you think is there between the youth of the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and the youth today?
Oh, there's no comparison. I have two grandsons that are married now,
Mm-hmm.
and they're busy working, but I'm sure that they would have to make a lot of adjustment if.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Were you ever married?
Oh yes, I was married, had 3 children, built a home, had a business.
What kind of business?
I was in the gauging business. I worked for Honeywell in their inspection department. I was their chief tool inspector, and then I sold those kinds of equipment. I could take an inch and divide it into 1,000,000 pieces.
How do you think things have changed from your generation to the next, and then on to the next?
Oh, it's hard to compare. We live in a push button world now.
Mm-hmm.
I go and my meals are given to me, and my health care and everything, and it's entirely different than it was when I was a boy.
Yeah.
My daddy would come home from work and make a crystal set for radio, and my son would take it, or my brother would take it out next day and sell it, so people could have radio before. We had to get it done before 10 o'clock at night when WCCO signed off. I remember Lincoln, Lindbergh,
Mm-hmm.
when he flew across the ocean.
Charles Lindbergh?
1927. And I knew him later in life as he worked on as we built airplanes.
Huh. So you've met Charles Lindbergh then?
Oh yes, I knew him.
Wow.
He came down. I was working in Fort Worth, Texas. We were building B-24s, the one with the double tail,
Mm-hmm.
and he came down trying to get some more quality into the aircraft. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a little cast iron model of the Spirit of St. Louis.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Yes. I've seen it in Washington, and they hung up in the air.
Yeah,
Oh,
in the museum.
Yes.
I've never been to Washington. I'd like to
yes.
check it out sometime. Having lived through 5 wars and numerous conflicts, what kind of effect do you think that they've had on your family?
Well, me and my older brother were the ones that were in Marine Corps,
Mm-hmm.
and the rest were at home. And now my boys growing up were debating about going to fight in Vietnam. That was a very unpopular war, and they both wound up with health problems that didn't let them go. And we had a different attitude than the guys that not modern times. We were anxious to go. Gung ho, yes, flag the flag.
What about your grandchildren? Are any of them in the military, or?
Neither one of them are, and they probably would serve if called. I'm sure they're good boys, and but they haven't had to experience it. They didn't go volunteer.
Yeah.
No.
How do you feel about patriotism today versus previous generations? Is it the same or different?
It's different.
It's different?
Yes.
And how would you say?
Well, as I said, in my generation, we were gung ho. I wrote a book called Willing Warriors, and that all dealt with guys that went and volunteered and wanted to go and fight. Today it's not that way.
Well, I think to a degree, Pearl Harbor, there was a 16% approval rating of of going to war. Everybody wanted to stay neutral.
Yes.
And just like in the First World War, after they sank the Lusitania, then there was volunteers to go.
Yes.
After Pearl Harbor, it was nearly unanimous, and I think we might have saw a little bit of that after 9/11.
My father-in-law was in World War I, and my uncle was in World War I. He was a Marine, and the other was in the Army, and they went and fought over in Europe in First World War.
Wow. So, how do you feel about the direction that our nation is going? Kind of transition to current events here. How do you feel about the direction we're headed socially?
I think it's all wrong. We're headed for we're spending ourselves into the ground. Trillions of dollars in debt with no regard to proper fiscal policy. And so it's a bummer.
And in terms of freedom and liberty, how do you feel? Where do you think we're at in terms of that? Do you think we have more freedom and liberty now versus before, or maybe is it kind of the other way around?
No, I don't think that matters. In this country, we're most fortunate. But in other places around the world, where if you dare say a word, well, you might get your head cut off.
That was like in Libya right now.
Yeah. The whole Mediterranean area is under fire. Egypt and Libya and Tripoli and all the rest.
Yeah, it makes me a little nervous because we get a lot of our oil from over there, and even the oil we don't get from over there, it affects the price.
Oh yes, yes. Yeah, well, it's heading for $5 a gallon. I had a filling station.
Really?
And we sold 5 gallons for $1. I remember pump the gas.
So, being that we're in an economic situation now where we've spent ourselves into so much debt, that could create a problem where we can't recover from it. And if anything were to happen to the dollar or the economy, the markets, that crashed everything again to the point of the Great Depression, what do you think has brought us to this point where we're at?
I didn't quite hear that question.
Okay.
I got bad hearing.
Oh, I do too. Being where we're at economically, with all the spending and all the debt, what do you think has brought us to this point? Is it just poor fiscal policy, or
irresponsible political people down in Washington that are full of greed, and they've spent without regard for whether the money was there or not, and that's why they've spent us into this situation. It's the Congress and the President. They've been willing to go wild. We had Reagan, who was a much more conservative person. Several others were, but in the present political situation, I think the Lord has it under control, and I believe that we're getting close to end times and the rapture and the end of the world. I lead a class in Bible study, and we're very much aware of there's nothing we can do about it. The Lord Lord has got it all set up, and we're gonna have a day real soon.